Hey everybody, my name is Javan, and if you clicked on this video, you're probably dealing with addiction. Either yourself or someone you love is struggling. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay. I struggled for many years with addiction, so I'm going to share my story in hopes that there's something here you can take away and apply in your life or to help you persevere if it's somebody that you love. I have a favorite saying of mine. You may be familiar with it. It's an old Persian saying, this too shall pass. And essentially, what it means is acknowledges the impermanence of all situations, both good and bad. For the good, it helps you appreciate the moment that you're in right now, to enjoy it, to savor it. And for the bad, it helps you to persevere in those uncomfortable situations where growth really occurs. All of this is going to eventually pass by and you'll come out the other side stronger. I'll begin my addiction story with my upbringing, my childhood. I was raised in a very turbulent household. My father was an alcoholic. My parents fought almost constantly. That was difficult for me, just wanting to feel loved and feel like I belonged. When you're in a household like that, where there's constant arguments and bickering, you're just a child. There's a part of you that subconsciously feels like it's your fault. And so I tried to overcompensate by being the best little boy I could. And that was damaging because later on that led to people pleasing behaviors. So when I was about 10, my parents eventually got divorced. Around the same time, I was starting a new school. I was in the gifted program. It was difficult for me because not only was I dealing with what was going on at home, but I wasn't fitting in with the rest of the so-called smart kids. Maybe that had something to do with what was going on in my household, but it definitely affected me and it made me kind of isolate a lot. Didn't fit in anywhere, didn't fit in with the regular kids, didn't fit in with the smart kids. So I went through a lot of depression and anxiety when I was a kid. Later on in life, I eventually left the gifted program and I ended up turning to drugs, alcohol from a very young age. When I was about 11, I got drunk for the first time. I was visiting my father and he gave me a couple of beers. And immediately I felt this sense of relief like, wow, this is amazing. I don't feel any of the pain that I felt. Almost it was gone because of this magical drug that made me feel happy and energetic. So I always remembered that later on in my life. I was about 14, I think, when I started using marijuana, the usual teenage crowd at high school smoking weed under the bridge, bush parties on the weekend with alcohol and various other substances. When I was about 18, family members started giving me Oxycontins and Percocet. And that quickly developed into a pretty severe opioid addiction. And I would take even like handfuls of over the counter Tylenol with codeine. I'm sure my liver was loving me for that, just how it went. I was using anything I could get my hands on. My early adulthood wasn't much better. I was a weekend drinker, kind of always in denial of my situation, denial of my issues, because I wasn't really self aware enough to realize. Eventually, my drinking really caught up to me. It progressed very slowly. And when alcohol wasn't doing it, I turned to things like cough syrup. I would drink whole bottles of cough syrup. I would take handfuls of Gravol, still taking Tylenol ones, and not really realizing what was at the core, what was the crux of this problem. I was in constant denial of my mental health issues and I was self medicating. Eventually, something happened. I had a spiritual awakening under the influence of certain substances, and I started looking at my life differently. It opened my eyes to see that this wasn't working for me. I eventually went to get a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and ADHD. But I didn't get those diagnoses right away. It was bipolar at first and depression. It took many years of experimenting with different medications to find something that would work for me. I was meditating at the time, but I never really took it too seriously. I never realized that at the time that that would be one of the core things that would help me to get better. Fast forward a few years to 2020, and I was dealing with a lot of isolation around that time. And we all know what happened around 2020. And it really affected my whole life. It affected my work, it affected my relationship with my family. And I would drink anything I could get my hands on. I would drink mouthwash, hand sanitizer. When the LCBO wasn't open, I would just chug it. I did go to rehab about 3 times. Each time I took something away, but each time I relapsed. The important thing is I did take something away at the time. And I would apply those lessons eventually down the road to my sobriety, which I've maintained pretty good so far. There were a couple of moments in my journey that really helped me that I'd never forget to apply to my life and to set things right with my relationships. One of those experiences was my second time staying in rehab. It was at Newport Center. I was doing meditation 3 times a day. I was doing Wim Hof breathing and in cold showers. I was doing Om chanting 3 times a day. I would chant Om 33 times. And eventually one day I was lying in bed after doing this meditation, and I was overcome with a sense of bliss I had never experienced under the influence of any kind of drug ever in my life. It was out of this world bliss. And I was lying there in bed and just waves of euphoria bathing over me from the meditation. Little did I know what was going to happen next. 4:30 in the morning, I wake up in terror. Like I'm talking full-blown panic attack. I was pacing up and down the halls of the rehab. I was sweating. My hands and feet were cold, and I didn't know what was going on. I had to go to the hospital. I got medication for anxiety. And that every single morning, I would wake up in anxiety, and I didn't know what was going on. Well, little did I know that what was happening was my ego was fighting a shift that was about to happen. What happened was I was in class and I was talking about my artwork, and one of my classmates complimented me on my art. I do digital art. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion from this compliment that I started bawling. I was just crying my eyes out. And I didn't know why. And everyone was coming up to me and consoling me and patting me on the back. And after group, I went outside into the courtyard. I started pacing around, just doing laps around the courtyard barefoot. I took my shoes off, got my feet in the grass, and contemplating my whole existence and everything that I had done up until that point. And I felt a release. I felt forgiveness. I felt divine. I don't know what. It was like a weight had been lifted off me, and I just kept crying, and I was hugging trees, and I felt this amazing sense of oneness and unification with all things, with all creation. It was amazing. It was one of the most transformative experiences. I did have a relapse afterwards when I left rehab, and you're probably wondering, okay, what's the point? What did that do? Well, I never forget the lessons that I learned. I always sort of held on to the feeling of bliss. I held on to the feeling of release, the feeling of purging, the death of my ego, maybe not ego death, but the profound change. And I realized afterwards that that anxiety was just my ego fighting. The ego's very powerful and it doesn't want to change it. It resists change. And so the whole takeaway was that I have to change. And I did. It took me a little while, but I changed. Another sort of incident that happened that really woke me up was I almost lost my marriage through my drinking. I ended up having contact with another woman that I had met in rehab. And this was after I had left. I was plastered off my face. I was not thinking straight. And I ended up sending her some texts that I never would have sent if I had been sober. And I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying that alcohol was to blame per se. It wasn't. Let's just flat out say it. It wasn't. But it definitely contributed. It took a long time for my wife and I to repair the damages. In fact, there's still scars left over. I can definitely tell. And I put my kids through a lot too. They knew what happened. They've always known what was going on with my drinking. And it was just, I can't go back to that life. I can't. I have to move on. So I have to work on myself, my spirituality. My spirituality now is better than ever. I'm really in touch with my higher power. I do regular meditation, breath work, cold showers. I bought a cold plunge tub for the backyard. It's great. I do sun gazing. I do earthing. I play music. I go for hikes in nature. All of these things are part of my recovery journey. And if I ever find that I'm sort of slouching or slacking in these areas, that's going to be a big red flag for me. And I'm going to know you got to straighten up or you're heading down a very dangerous path. So, for anyone out there who's wondering what they should be doing, can they help someone else? My biggest recommendation is to get help. Get into a program, get into an inpatient program. There are some free ones, they have waiting lists if money is an issue, but get into something, do something, get the help. Find a group of people that you connect with. Find an AA meeting if you need to. There's smart recovery, there's day programs, there's all kinds of things that you can do. And most importantly, when you're not in those groups, when you're not in a rehab, replace your bad habits with something good, something beneficial that makes you feel good. Exercise, journaling, meditation, I've already mentioned, but just something. And I just want to say, whatever it is you're going through, it's okay. If you are struggling, it's okay. If someone you know is struggling, it's going to be okay. Honestly, don't stress. Stressing is not going to get you anywhere. Remember, this too shall pass. Live for the moment. Live in the present. Be mindful. The future is unknown. Hopefully there's something here you can take away, guys. No matter what happens, just go with the ebb and flow.